and welcome. Hi, Lola. Hi. Yeah, welcome to a stolen bit of time to do a wrap up of September. I had a great reading month in September. My average reading score across the month was lower than any other month, but I think that's just because of the kinds of books that I was reading. I tend to not rate thrillers so high, I guess. I didn't really know this about myself, but apparently that is the case. And I am currently trying to very quickly record this wrap up because all day yesterday I tried to sit down to do it and the puppy wouldn't let me. And this morning I sat down to do it. I was all dressed and beautiful and made up and ready to go. And she jumped on me and my coffee went literally from head to toe. I had to clean the upholstered chair. I had to clean the carpet. I had to take a shower. I had to start a load of laundry. I had to get redressed. And so now I have given her a bone to chew on, a special bone. And I'm just sitting on the couch as if I'm talking on the phone. So she doesn't think I'm doing something curious, interesting, and special for the most part, but I only have until that bone is gone. So I'm gonna quickly do this. And I don't have teacup questions because those just take way too long. So let's just start with the two nonfiction that I read. One of them was this glorious beast, The Brontes, Wild Genius of the Moors, The Story of a Literary Family by Juliet Barker. This was a reread for me, but I promise you I am not kidding when I tell you that I did not remember even 2/3 of what is in this book. And I know the Brontes. I know the Bronte family. This book is full of treasure. There are some things that I disagree with as far as Juliet Barker putting some motivations on certain people that I just don't think are valid or supported well enough to claim. But otherwise, it is a masterpiece. It is a life's work. And I know Juliet Barker has written many other wonderful things. In fact, she is the editor of my favorite Bronte biography, which is actually kind of an autobiography because it is called A Life in Letters, and it's just a collection of letters from all members of the Bronte family. And I just absolutely love that one. If you have not read A Life in Letters, then I strongly suggest you get your hands on that. That is my favorite way to experience a Bronte biography. And she's the editor of that. So I would recommend it. And let's just move on to the next. I read this, How to Write Like a Writer by Thomas C. Foster. Thomas C. Foster is the author of How to Read Literature Like a Professor, and all of those kinds of books. 25 Books That Shaped America, How to Read Poetry Like a Professor. I really appreciate his books, especially coming from a teaching standpoint. I've used chapters from his books to help students grasp things like theme and symbolism, and I just really enjoy his approach to simplify, to quote Thoreau. I really, really enjoy his writing. And so when I saw that he had a new one coming out, How to Write Like a Writer, I pulled this into my pre-order cart immediately. So yes, I pre-ordered this and it arrived and I read it during breaks at work. And there are some things that I will implement for my students. Some of it feels very common sense, but common sense isn't so common, I guess. Okay, so now I have a list of house books that I am going to go through. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 house books. If you remember, if you saw my TBR, you know that I was going to pull as many books off of my shelf as I could that had the word house in the title and read them. And there are still 3 that I didn't get to, but there are 2 that I realized I had that I didn't present in my TBR video. So in reality, I could have done 5 more, but I only did 2 more. So I did not get to The House on Foster Hill, The House of Gold, or The House Across the Lake. But October is still spooky season. House of Gold is not spooky. I may wait till November for that one, but for House on Foster Hill and The House Across the Lake. I think I'm going to try and just do them in October, in addition to my TBR that I have set for October. So many of these are TBR veterans. The first two I'm going to show you, though, are ones that came to me from Book Outlet sometime in the past year. The first is Starter House by Sonia Condit. This was a delightful surprise. Now, one thing that I realized as I was reading through these books is that so many of them take a character that is either suffering from postpartum depression. There's a female and she's either had a baby or she's about to have a baby or she wants to have a baby. And they build around that. And I don't know if that's the influence of like Rosemary's Baby or what. Like, I don't know why they think that pregnant women are possibly crazy or supernatural conduits, but that was a common theme in these, and I don't really know how I feel about that. I think I don't like it. I think I don't appreciate it. I have never had a child of my own. I don't know. Maybe you do go crazy. I have no idea. I've been around a lot of pregnant women, and I don't think that they become particularly spiritually attuned. But that was a common denominator in a lot of these books. That is one of the things that's going on in this. So basically in this one, there's a teacher, and she's recently married and recently purchased a starter house with her recently married husband, and she's recently pregnant. And she starts to interact with one day, you know how kids go door to door and they knock on the doors and then they ask you to buy this thing, a big chocolate Easter egg or a candy bar or a book of coupons or something to support their school. Well, this kid shows up, knocks on the door, and I don't remember exactly what he was selling, but it was like a knife and a hammer or something. She's like, that's unusual. And it just gets weirder and weirder from there, but it all comes together in the end. It had a very satisfying ending. I would say the writing is really, really great. I was drawn in. I would also say the story has a lot of holes in it, but it was a great experience. I really loved it. Pregnant woman and all. Definitely a haunted house book. Definitely real ghosts, not psychological. And would highly recommend that one if you really enjoy a good haunted house ghost story with a pregnant woman. This one also had a pregnant woman. This one was a little too weird for me. This is The Upstairs House by Julia Fine. It is about a pregnant, or not, she's not pregnant, she's had the baby, so she's going through postpartum depression, woman who is also a graduate student who is writing her graduate thesis on the woman who wrote Goodnight Moon, Margaret Wise Brown. And I learned all sorts of things about Margaret Wise Brown that I did not know were things, because I then went on a Google spiral. But basically, Margaret Wise Brown is possibly a heroine type figure in this book. She's maybe her ghost is maybe living in the attic of this woman's house. And there's a connection there and beyond the thesis. And she also is possibly the villain. So it's a dual timeline with a ghost, with multiple narrators, a children's book writer's sordid past. It was interesting. But like I said, it was maybe just a little too much for me. I didn't really enjoy it. I was compelled to finish it. When it was finished, I was like, was that worth it? I don't know. I gave it 2 stars. I don't generally do star ratings in this, but I gave a lot of books 2 stars this month, even though, like I said, I was compelled, but I just think that the actual outcome of the story was disappointing. Now, the rest of these are all TBR veterans, and I'm really happy that I finally read them. So I read Karen White's first book in her Trad Street, or House on Trad Street series. This is called The House on Trad Street. This is the origin story of how the woman, what's her name? Melanie Middleton, who is an interior designer and real estate agent. Maybe she's just a real estate agent who likes to interior design. There's a lot of talk of interior design, but I think she might just be a real estate agent. Anyway, it's about a woman who sells some houses. old houses in, I believe, Charleston or Savannah, somewhere southern like that. In Charleston, South Carolina. And how she inherits randomly a house from a potential client when he passes away. And that house is haunted, and she has to help the ghosts figure out, and some living people figure out some mysteries associated with that house. That is the first in a series, and I will definitely be continuing that series. It was really fun and really lighthearted, and at times kind of spooky. It's not terrifying. If you are like a low stakes kind of scary story person, I would highly recommend these. They're also a romance, and it was fun. It was delightful. I really enjoyed it. I knew that I would because I've already read the Christmas one by accident. I didn't realize it was a series or a thing, and so a few years ago when the Christmas one was new, I thought, oh, this is a haunted house thing. Maybe this is like Christmas Carol. And no, it was nothing like Christmas Carol. It was like the house on Trad Street. And then I realized it was a series, and I was like, oh, I need to get to that series, and it took me years, and here I am, and I will definitely read the rest of these books. And more Karen White as well. I realized that she is an author who has written quite a few books, and I really enjoyed her comfortable writing style. I read The House by Christina Lauren. I didn't realize going into this that this was a YA, and I probably wouldn't have bought it or read it if I knew that it was a YA, but I didn't, and so I did buy it years ago, and I did read it. And it is a weird one. It is about a sentient house that raises and loves a boy, and what happens when that boy falls in love with a girl and wants to bring her home. And it was really scary at moments. If I were going to rank these, I would say it was maybe it was up there. It was one of the scarier books, and it is definitely YA. Like, the love story is so cheesy. It's cringy. It just made me cringe the whole time. But it was also a really interesting and unique story, and like I said, there were moments when it was really kind of scary. I think that if you enjoy, and it is completely supernatural, but I'm about to compare the vibe of it to something that is not supernatural, which is Pretty Little Liars. If you enjoy the original Pretty Little Liars series, I haven't read the books, but definitely not the new series, which is kind of just like a slasher film. You enjoy the original series from ABC Family, then I definitely think that you would enjoy the vibe of House by Christina Lauren. I would read that again. I would read it again. It's the House on Trad Street I would read again. So those two I would read again. The other two I don't know that I would read again. This next one, House of Echoes, was my favorite house book of the month. The House of Echoes by Brendan Duffy is just your run-of-the-mill gothic story. It's like this family moves into a house. They're going to turn it into an inn. It's secluded. It's in a small little town. Town happens to have family ties for this family. Like, they go way back, and some weird things start happening. And I just really, really enjoyed it. If you enjoy something like The Shining, it's a totally different story, even though there is a hotel and a family involved. But it is a totally different story. But if you enjoy something like The Shining, then you might really enjoy this book. Brendan Duffy, House of Echoes. It doesn't do anything very innovative with like a gothic spooky storyline, but it really tells a solid ghost story, a solid something else story. Which, also there's a pregnant woman. She's not pregnant, but she just had a baby. So of course, there's also the death of a beagle. If it's off page, but it foreshadows for you like scary movies do, where there's this beagle and is always getting into the wrong things. And so just to know, the beagle does die if that is something that you need to know. I have a beagle puppy, as we all know. I have a beagle puppy, and I also don't generally read things in which animals are harmed or confused or injured or teased or anything like that. And I could read it, so but it is there. It is a plot point. more so than the pregnant woman. Carol Goodman's The Widow's House. This is the one that has been on my TBR the longest. I have moved this around the country with me. I've read the beginning twice, 3 times now, and never finished it until now. And now that I have finished it, I'm like, oh, I should have got rid of that book a long time ago. So The Widow's House has all the fall vibes. This book is set in fall and on the East Coast, and it feels like fall. And it's got, apples and orchards and all that stuff, and it's got ghosts, and it's got all sorts of fun stuff going on. And then in the end, it's like a Lifetime movie. I don't want to ruin anything for anybody. I think that if I had read it beginning to end the first time in a short amount of time, like if I had like a really quick momentum, I probably would be judging it less harshly than I did when I finally did finish it, because I really wanted it to be worth all of that time and energy and effort and space that I've given to it all these years, and it just wasn't. This one is a ghost story, but it's also like a marriage story, and and it used some plot devices that I just thought were, for lack of a better word right now, because I see that my dog's already more than halfway through her bone, cheap. So let's go move on. The House Between Tides, a novel by Sarah Maine. This was not a scary story. This is a woman in Ireland or Scotland. This is a woman in Scotland who, she lives in London. She has a family house, and she's going to have it renovated. So she's, at the beginning, she is working from London with contractors and things to have it renovated, and they, so that she can move into it. And they discover a body under the floor, and they happen to discover it the day before she happens to make a surprise visit. Surprise! And then, so it's the story, that it goes into a dual timeline, and it tells the story of who this person was, and how they ended up where they ended up. And so it is, it's well told. It wasn't really what I was in the mood for. It didn't fit with the other house themes, and that is not its fault. It was a little bit overwritten, I would say, especially the parts that take place in the past. I was much more energized by, enthralled by, pulled into the storyline that was in the present. It felt better written. It felt more real. The old one felt like someone was trying to capture the old timiness of the early 1900s. Like, it was a little clunky. Yeah. And I gave it a solid 3 stars. It was an interesting story and a great little mystery. I think other writers do the same thing better, like Fiona Davis. Then I read this. I finally read The House of Leaves by Mark Z. Danielewski. Did I read it, or did it read me? That is the question. I still am processing this book. It is the kind of thing that I think it's, okay, the reading experience of it is ridiculous. I think its brilliance lies in the fact that it's a puzzle that you want to solve that there is no solution to. So your brain just spins on it all the time, and it tries so desperately to find significance in the completely insignificant. And it is a brilliant work, and I will reread it, and I did hate it. And therefore it is glory. If you haven't, I think I called it at some point a rite of passage, and I really do think it is a rite of passage. If you want your books to make you work, that's your book. If you want your books to reward you, that's not your book. There is, I want to reread it several times now. Like, I read it straight through, every word in the order that it told me to. But I want to read just the storyline, and then I want to go back and read just the like ephemera, but I don't know when I'm going to do that. No time soon. But it is definitely a book that once you read it, like, it haunts you. It is the greatest ghost story because that book is never going to let you go. Never. I do have another stack of books that we need to go through. Not very many, but these are the other books that weren't house books and weren't nonfiction that I read. So let me go grab those and I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. And she is done with her bone, and Lord help us. So I listened. Hi, you done with your bone? Just a little bit left. You don't want it? Okay. So I listened to 2 books from my library without physical copies. Both of them were lighthearted, silly books. One is Smells Like Tween Spirit, which I will put here, which is the 4th book in the Class Mom series, which I really love, by Lori Gelman, who is just such a fun writer. I can't tell you much about it because it is book 4, but it is generally about a family and about a woman who does it all with varying levels of success. It's a family, kind of like a family drama full of comedy. And I just really, really love it. So if you like a good series, a good contemporary series about family life, I would highly suggest Lori Gelman's Class Mom series. So I listened to that because it was brand new this year and I love them. I absolutely love them, and I love listening to the audiobooks. And then I also listened to this one on a whim. This was Blame It on the Brontes by, I don't remember right now off the top of my head, but I'll put a picture here and you can see who it's by. And I listened to this because of the cover and because of the title, Blame It on the Brontes. There's a little mystery element to this. It's about a graduate student who goes back to her hometown to write. She's not a graduate student, but graduate professor trying to get tenure. But she needs to write and publish, and so she goes home to publish during a sabbatical, and she wants to investigate who's writing raunchy retellings of classic books from her hometown. It is not anything that any literature graduate student would ever write about, but this one. I figured it out literally by the 3rd chapter. And I don't think I was supposed to. The writing was just that kind of transparent. It had some funny moments. I was generally listening to this as I was walking home from work, and it definitely kept me entertained. But then about 2/3 of the way in, I was like, I already know what's going to happen. I know what's going to happen with the romance. I know the mystery. I know what's going to happen with the different relationships with the people in her life. And I'm done, and the book isn't. And so it got kind of stale, and I will be honest, I skipped like the last 15 chapters and went straight to the final chapter and didn't miss a thing. So it was maybe a great premise with a really humorous pivot point that needed more development. It was immature writing, I guess, is what I would like to say, even for the genre. So I am considering that it was just supposed to be a lighthearted, like, rom-com. And it was a lighthearted rom-com that didn't offer me anything new or believable at all. So I probably would not recommend that one. I definitely would not reread that one, and I'm not interested in reading anything else by that author. But it wasn't a terrible experience either, if that all makes sense. Last one that I don't have a copy for which I do have a copy for, but it's my gigantic Shakespeare bind up, which if you've been around, you know I talk about it all the time, and I never want to haul it off my shelf for these because it's so heavy. So, Merchant of Venice. I really enjoyed rereading this. I don't know, it's maybe the 30th time I've read it, but I do really enjoy it. And several years ago, years ago, I had the joy of seeing a local Shakespeare group redo it, kind of, perform it as if Shylock were a single mother, female business owner. And that really changed the way that this is why I can never do videos. That really changed the way that I read that play. And understand that play. And so now every time I read that play, I read it that way. And I would highly recommend everyone give it a chance that way at least once. Okay, I read September by Rosamund Pilcher in September, and it is all the things that I love about Rosamund Pilcher, but also I didn't love it as much as Winter Solstice. I think Winter Solstice is the one to beat for me, and that's probably because it was my first Rosamund Pilcher, and it just introduced me to the depth of her storytelling and made me fall in love with those characters. And that is the key here, is that I did not love these characters at all. I was curious, and I felt so comfortable and at home in the world that she was creating with them, and it is always a joy to read her writing. But I just didn't care about the characters, really. There is one little boy who has to go to boarding school, and that was really breaking my heart through that whole thing with the mother just kind of freaking out about that, and I just was like so irritated with the father. But other than that, was the biggest response that these characters got from me, and that is not even, it's like a third of the way into the book. It's not even near the end. And in the end, there's really a big revelation about one of the characters, about an action that they take, and it should have floored me, and it just didn't. It should have floored me, and it didn't. I read Agatha Christie's A Caribbean Mystery. This is the third to last in the Miss Marple series. And Miss Marple Agatha has lost her hold on Miss Marple. She no longer is writing the Miss Marple that I know. And I just miss Miss Marple. I don't know if I want to continue on with the last 3 books, October, November, and December. I don't know if I want to finish those books because I am losing Miss Marple myself, but I think I have to. I'm a completionist, so I will. But I really did not like this. The last one that I really, really loved was A Pocket Full of Rye. And that was the one where I felt like she really got into the psychology of Miss Marple and really started to reveal like another side of Miss Marple, and then she just pulls back so far, and we lose her. We've lost her from 450 to Paddington, The Mirror Cracked from Side to Side, A Caribbean Mystery. We've lost her. 450 to Paddington, she was there like she was in the books earlier, I guess, but it's just different. And I didn't enjoy it as much as I have some of the previous. I read The Witches of the Moonshine Manor by Bianca Murray, and this was great. This is about 80-year-old witches. It has some just really beautiful passages. I was constantly marking passages. Just so gorgeously written. She's learned that adults communicate in strange ways that often don't resemble communication at all, like how a sweating tumbler full of whiskey can mean the observance of an important anniversary because of how it appears in the same July day every year, staining the table's wood until its surface eventually looks like interlaced Milero rings, a staple of every magician's bag of tricks, rising up through the polish, ... And also how muffled sounds in the middle of the night, too high-pitched to be words, can sound like steam escaping a valve on a pressure cooker, and how crying without tears can sound like that, and how the absence of tears doesn't signify the absence of pain, but in fact is just the opposite. It's a beautifully written book, and it's a little too long, and it's a beautifully written book. It's a little too long, and I loved every second of it. I did. I loved every second of it. It does try to cover just a little too much, and it doesn't really get there. It wants to talk about gender fluidity, and it wants to talk about ageism, and it wants to talk about feminism, and it wants to talk about gentrification, and it wants to talk about race issues, and it wants to talk about police and policing, and it wants to talk about Salem, and it wants to talk about all of these things, patriarchy, and it's just a little too much, to be honest. And I read that the afterword or an interview or something with the author where she started this, the start of the, like before the pandemic, and then she wrote it through the pandemic. And I do feel like so many books, like The Sentence by Louise Erdrich, I feel like so many books that come out of the pandemic are just so meandery, because I think we just all lost sense of connection and time and a linear storytelling line. Like, I think we just lost concept and produced some interesting stuff, which I am starting to see similarities in, but I don't know that I appreciate living those things in plot. But the book was great. I don't really want to read anything else by this author, but I liked this enough to keep it and to recommend it and to want to read it again. This was a happy little accident, The Book of Accidents by Chuck Wendig. I got this from my library. I think it's probably late and I need to return it. But I loved it. It was so scary and it was so dark, and I mean, I just got done saying, I don't generally read things where bad things happen to animals. Things happen to animals, things happen to people, things happen to children. It is so creepy, and that end is worth it. I loved the end, and I am now a Chuck Wendig fan forever because of this book and the end. Never has a horror story gotten an ending so good. I loved it. I am sure it is not everybody's cup of tea, because people keep writing horror stories with endings that I think are not good, to be quite honest. This ending was so good, and I can't tell you a thing about it. But the basic premise of this is that you've got two kids that grew up in the same town. They become adults and they move away. They both have terrifying experiences as children in this place. Different terrifying experiences. They don't really talk about them. They move away, they meet, they get married, they have a child, and circumstances draw them back. And then things start to come together. They have to face their past, and they have to face their present, and they have to face their possible future, while going through some spiritual things and some psychological things. And it's just a work of brilliance. I absolutely loved it. It is a completely different story from Imaginary Friend by the person being Wallflower guy. I can't remember his name right now. It's a completely different story, but it had that same kind of writing style feel to it that I really, really loved about Imaginary Friend. And Imaginary Friend was a chunker too, and I felt like it was too long. This one is a chunker, and I was like, it's over already? It read so quickly, and I loved it. Last book, not finishing on a high. Should have finished on a high. But that is The 1,000 Crimes of Ming Tzu by Tom Lin. This is just it's a spaghetti western. It's just a cowboy movie with a Asian protagonist, and all this person is doing is killing people. It's an Asian protagonist who just goes around trying to wreak revenge on people who did something very terrible to him. But it's just like he goes into these fever dreams as he wanders around the desert, and then he finds a person and he kills him, and then he goes and he wanders around the desert and he finds a person and he kills him. And he collects this kind of weird group of people, prophet and a person who can see the future but they're blind, and just like, it's a lot of tropes and cliches and killing. Just lots and lots of killing with some flashbacks and yeah, it wasn't for me. Anyway, that is my wrap up for September. I read a ton of books that I didn't intend to read. I read a bunch of books that I did intend to read. I got so many books off of my TBR that have been TBR veterans. I'm gonna say this was a huge success, even if this one has made my wrap up a bit disjointed and chaotic and rushed. So I am doing something really cool for Victober that I've never done before. I have never done a month-long reading vlog, but I am going to do it. I am doing it. I'm in the middle of doing it. I am already, I've already recorded things about Uncle Silas, and I am about to record another update for Uncle Silas. So you'll see this outfit again, this sleep shirt, basically. And I'm really excited about what I'm reading so far for Victober. I'm gonna hurry up and get this done so that I can play with this one here and get some energy out so that we can have a calm evening. Although what you did see today is pretty calm for her. Anyway, this was a great reading month, and we are in October now, and let's go read.